to our series, Expert at Home. I feel really blessed today to have with me Dr. Bonnie Goldstein, who is a clinical psychologist in Los Angeles and who runs a center that services both teens and their families. And also she runs Lifespan Learning Institute at this point, which puts on amazing conferences and has amazing archive conference materials that are also available. So check out their website as well. Bonnie, thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's lovely to be with you, Lisa, and to be with our community and to invite in people who are listening now live, and also for all those who are going to listen after. So much of what we'll speak about, we'll look at the current crises of sorts, the myriad. This has been quite a year, the beginning of 2020. And we'll also look at more foundational issues that are prevalent with, today we'll do adolescent in particular and their families, and also weave into some of the child work that we do. So hopefully everyone listening will both access their clinical ideas and experiences, but more importantly, that little kid inside all of us, that child that maybe feeling as I did, a bit anxious, and then even more trepidation. And as things kept on coming, perhaps a bit hopeless or overwhelmed, and it comes in waves. And so certainly today we'll address those waves.
Great. I find that too, that it does come in waves and that there is a lot of anxiety at this time, I think, for all of us. First of all, I hope you and your family are all safe and good.
Thank you. Yes, we are the lucky ones. There are so many in our community who aren't as fortunate, and I really recognize that. And a shout out now for all that are those who are giving their hours and some their lives to help others. And in my own way, working online through teletherapy and doing these seminars, we're hoping to help. But I really have such respect and appreciation for all the people who are going into work and taking such risks of their own lives and the lives of their family.
Absolutely. And like you said, we're lucky to have an option and a lot of people, and that's really important to recognize. So I want to talk to you particularly about how teenagers, how adolescents are dealing with this time period, some of the things that are impacting them. What are some of the issues that it's bringing up for the young people you work with?
Well, let's start with defining teenage, which I have a working definition that keeps on stretching and stretching. Now it's from 9 to 29 or 30s, or we have a whole population of what we'll call the boomerang kid. My oldest son has just come back to Los Angeles because he was working abroad. My youngest has just come back to Los Angeles because her college sent her home in March. So teenage extends. So many of our family members are struggling now with living at home again unexpectedly, not being able to do what we know is normal teenage experience. What are teenagers? Their job is to go out in the world, to engage. We want to foster social engagement, connection, hugs. In fact, let's just take a minute to talk about the physical through the lens of sensory motor psychotherapy and the work that Pat Ogden and I are doing. We're aware that the very basis, the foundation of what we want in life, to be able to physically touch another, is unavailable to us. Certainly we can talk to one another. We're blessed in a generation that has access, most of us, to Zoom or to some form of FaceTime or communication, and yet it's so very different. In fact, often when I'm talking, in fact, as you're listening now or watching now, maybe take your hands and put your hands on your arms and just give a squeeze. Yeah, just as Lisa and I are doing. And just notice as you do that, what happens inside your body. Teenagers, I'm always encouraging them to do this, to really ground themselves by coming here. And then as you're listening, all of you, you might want to put your feet to the ground. I'm shifting in my chair. This grounding is so important for teenagers. the physical, the touching, the grounding of the feet, the putting your hands, join me if you wish and put your hands on your knees and push down and just feel yourself coming into the room. That becomes something that teenagers forget to do. Now, they're experts at being online. In fact, until this year, we were always worried as parents and as clinicians, too much technology, too much technology. And now this is their only resource. This is how they're learning. This is how they're connecting. This is how they're touching. And our teenagers are often shifting from the jubilant, joyous first week or two, yay, no school, to I miss my friends. I even miss those teachers. I hate being at home. I hate the family dynamics. I hate either the isolation of being the only one or ones at home, or the overcrowding of feeling there are just too many people and I have no space. We find that clinically, it's hard to have a therapy session without an interruption when people are at home. And there's always the apologies, but when you're right in the middle of working and there's such emotion coming up, and then a parent comes in, did you do your laundry? Or a child or a teenager, let's play, let's do, somebody invades the space. I say clinically, that's the most important thing for teens, is to carve out a space. With one of my teens who we've started working outside in her garden, we call it her office. We go out into nature. She's able to hear the sounds of the birds. And as we all notice, when there were less cars in March, April, and May, we could hear nature in a whole new way. And that's a time in Los Angeles of rebirthing. So there were so many baby birds and the sounds, the ambient noises. We used them to resource her, to fill her up when she was feeling the deprivation of not getting to do the things she wanted to do, to go to the places she wanted to go. Now, Lisa, I will mention one whole population, which are those teens that love this, that would prefer to be online with challenges of social engagement. Perhaps they're part of the autistic spectrum. Here in Los Angeles, we're hearing numbers of diagnosed autistic spectrum of 1 in 150, maybe more, maybe less, but that's a lot of kids who are feeling better because they get to just be left alone at home with their technology. And that's, perhaps we'll have a whole chat on that. But then we have all the others where the hopelessness, the sadness, and the disembodiment, the not feeling their own body because their sense of self was based on their peer group. It's very difficult.
Yeah. And, you know, like the young people sent home from college, I have a niece too who's home from school. You know, now they're back with their parents and it feels so odd. You know, they were moving away from that and their focus was so much more on their peers. And now all of a sudden, here they are.
So we have your niece who's saying, wait, this is not, both developmentally and societally, this is not where I ever envisioned being. And now that I come home, who am I? Am I an adult? Am I a roommate? Am I a child? What are my roles? I know with my adult daughter, we have her role cooking just about every night because that's her passion. So that's her offering. And I recommend for your niece to, hopefully, her parents are saying, what can you choose to offer for us? And then capitalizing on that so that we're empowering them. We're letting them feel a tiny sense of agency in a worldwide situation or crises. There are so many layers upon layers upon layers of crises.
Yeah.
And for your niece who went away, that developmental stage is hijacked.
Yeah. Yeah. And she is finding her way, but I think about that the cooking also resonates with me because I have another young patient of mine who came home from college and that's what he's doing for his family. And he's really enjoying it. In fact, thinking about changing his career goals in that direction.
How great. See, that's something we can do with our teens. Now, 4 months after, again, in March is when we in Los Angeles felt it most. Ask them, what are the gifts? Are there any gifts of this crisis? You can ask a 9-year-old that, and they can usually, at least when we work collaboratively, which is always how we're working with our adolescence, they can come up with something. And at first it was easy. I hated school. I don't have to go to school. I hated getting dressed. I don't have to get dressed for school. I hated the peer pressure, that need to fit in. I don't have to do any of that anymore. And then we did drop in deeper. The gift of your client who's now the chef at their home, or who now wants to become an expert at culinary. It's such an interesting kind of a question that we can ask 4 months after. What are the gifts?
Mm-hmm.
In what ways have you felt, or has there been a shift inside? And then parents, please name them. Therapists, self-disclosure here is beautiful. As long as the self-disclosures around resonates with our teens, being able to join them. For me, I love not having to be in traffic. That's one that most of us here in LA can resonate, and West LA in particular. It's such a relief, and has been an ongoing relief, not to have to deal with the burden of day-to-day life in that way. And kids will laugh. Another one is ordering groceries online. And with some teenagers, they become the deliverers. A number of my young adult teens found themselves overjoyed that they could become a food server. It was great tips. It was a great job. It felt safe to them. And so there are a couple of gifts amidst what we'll look at as the mess.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. How do you think it's affecting family dynamics? Are you seeing for people, especially, for families having to be, they're around each other a lot more, whether it's because they're home from college at a time if they wouldn't be, or whether it's high schoolers that are home or elementary school kids, parents are having a lot more contact with their children and vice versa.
You're asking such an important question. We have so many parents that say, I didn't plan on being a whole homeschool mama and a working person and having to be the chef and having to be the cleaner, especially when there wasn't that, when we have to look at parsing each of these roles out. And parents who feel so angry and so upset. One sensory motor psychotherapy body-based exercise for parents is to, once we validate those feelings, give them an outlet. If it's anger, give them an outlet. Sometimes when parents are feeling so frustrated, just having them push. In fact, everybody who's watching, take your hand, make one hand into a fist and push it into the other hand. And as you're pushing, you can feel a shaking that just happens organically. Push really, really hard. Maybe you can think about the edge of an angry moment that transpired, or maybe right now as you're listening, you're in the middle of one. And then let go and yield and just lean back into the aftermath of all that pushing. And maybe notice what happens inside your body. And imagine yourselves or your clients doing this while they're in those moments of high arousal with their family members, right when there's a triggering moment, to help them recognize that they have some power. I'd even often say push, not really hit, not this. This can be a resource too, but it often is an invitation to conflict. But rather this helps to consolidate the body. It often can be done so discreetly that it's not an overt invitation for conflict. Even if the people watching see it, they might recognize it, but it's not an instigator. And that pushing and then the releasing and then savoring the aftermath. Just as I push, and then at one point I feel my arms tingling, I can feel the shaking, I can feel my body reconsolidating, and then I can relax after. I can take a breath. I can feel my breath. Breath becomes such a resource for parents. We know it. We can teach it to others. Many of us are practitioners. I know I'm yoga. Others are meditators or mindfulness practitioners. And yet in the height of arousal, in those moments, if all we do is recognize our breath, that's the beginning. And one beautiful trick that Steve Porges, polyvagal theory, teaches us is taking a breath in and then exhaling longer than our inhales, so that we let our breath out. And even as I'm speaking with longer sentences than the inhale, and it allows me to relax. It allows me to calm my body, to feel the restoration, to feel the calming. And that becomes yet another trick that parents can embrace. They can invite in. They can use the breath, use the posture, use realignment. In fact, right now, again, as you're listening, maybe just take a minute to notice how you're listening. Are you laying down? If you are, align yourself. For me, I'm going to adjust myself in the chair. My posture changes. That small shift of posture becomes an agent, again, of an agent of change, because our bodies house those emotions, the frustrations, the anger, the resentments, those moments of what am I doing here and why? Or I didn't bargain for this and I don't know if I can handle this anymore. I would say for all of our parents who are feeling the hopelessness, knowing that you're not alone. That's why I'm such an advocate of groups. Knowing that you're not alone can make all the difference. At our office in Lifespan, we have parenting groups, and I'm on the board of the Maple Counseling Center in Beverly Hills in Los Angeles. It's a nonprofit agency that so wisely created groups for parents. You can join a group using teletherapy specific to parenting in the time of COVID. It's the most beautiful and cost-effective resource. And here at our office, we are doing, currently we have 6 online groups running, 2 more starting as the school year resumes. We're resuming 2 ongoing groups for children of all ages, but in particular for adolescents who want the anonymity of knowing nobody in their group. The beauty of having online sessions is we will have kids from all over Southern California. And we had one up in Seattle who joined in, whose parent had heard about our group. And the groups are 5 to 7 kids, all sharing, or teens, all sharing that sense of hopelessness. And with the parents that you were asking about, when we know we're not alone, it becomes so much easier to handle, to juggle, to deal with, to invite in. And then one of our best gems in Los Angeles, Dan Siegel, runs a weekly, ongoing, every Friday, free group, the We group, that I know he was one of your speakers. You may have had him share that when he was here. But Google, and Google Dan Siegel, Los Angeles, you'll be able to access that. Last that I checked, we had 17,000 people on that one particular Friday. I imagine all those lives can access a sense of you're not alone, even if you're the only one living at your residence, even if you're the only person dealing with what you're dealing with. And certainly if you're the parent feeling no one can understand. Hearing other people through the group modality, sharing, even sharing some of these body-based exercises, ways to resource ourselves. Another one for the parents you were asking about, Lisa, is walking. Taking a walk is such a safe and such a refueling resource. And for parents who cannot leave their kids because they have younger kids, take them on the walk, but have a Bose headphone or a noise-busting headphone so that even when there's whining, screaming, and upset, you can concomitantly hear music that you love. And it calms our central nervous system. You're still attending to your kids safely. Or find a place, a space in your house where you can stretch, do online yoga. Santa Monica Yoga here in Los Angeles has wonderful courses, including community yoga, where nobody needs to pay. I love that they do that because it allows all of us, wherever our economics are, to access some of these free resources that are available. And so as you're listening, think about what's available in your community, maybe something you knew about but haven't thought about, and access those now. Become part of those. It helps you break the monotony, the aloneness, the solidarity that when invited, solidarity is wonderful. Aloneness can be wonderful, but the loneliness that's epidemic right now, as we go month after month with uncertainty, we can break through that.
I think it's so important. And the sense of connection and those kinds of resources are so helpful because people are feeling so isolated during this time.
Yeah.
And I think for peers, the peer groups are interesting because so many, some teenagers are lucky enough to have a sibling at least, or hopefully one they get along with, that they can do some things with or share with, time with. But that peer influence, at that age, peers are so much more important than the adults in their life and in how, in what they're drawn to. And I find that actually even in younger kids too. I don't know if you've had that experience, but they want to be with each other almost as soon as they can mobilize themselves. And they want safe adults there to be there when they fall down, but they want to be with their peers. And, so many kids are deprived of that opportunity right now, especially if they don't have a sibling.
You are so right. Lisa, the interesting part of this is that as much as they can see their peers on Zoom or FaceTime, now there's a fatigue, Zoom fatigue. They're tired of it. They want the social bubble. They want the social distancing. They're often being told, no, I can't trust you. I can't trust myself. I can't trust your friends. So they're being told no to that instinct, that reaching, that wanting to connect. I have families where the parents will say, if you want to do this, we need to be in the environment. We don't have to be hovering, but we need to be visually, vigilantly watching. So the kids are allowed to have other kids. Now we have the luxury of the beach, but even a park where there can be social distancing and mask wearing that allows for a semblance of safety, and having a parent oversee this. One thing that I've done a few times with my college-age daughters, we've gotten online with her dear friend and her dear friend's mother. And we'll call it mother-daughter chats. Now, this is with the anticipation that they're going to get to go back to college rather than having yet another year online. And so far, so good. Though, as we say, we can't trust anything anymore because we just don't know. So in that, having the dyad, having the parents and the kids come together allows for kids to say what they need to say, be it, Mom, you're squashing my spirit, or you've got to let me some freedom, or let me at least social distance see my friends, or let's create a COVID bubble. We'll all get tested. And while we're aware that testing is not as available, certainly in our area, unless there's a huge need. And then even then it's not, so that becomes a problem. It becomes so necessary. And if we can get tested and then have a protective little family bubble, perhaps, or a unit, that helps. And helping our kids follow their passions and follow their dreams. I'm going to refer back to the wisdom you were describing with your client, Lisa, where you said he now wants to follow his culinary dreams. So if we can find out what new dreams or what old dreams can bubble up again and manifest them, imagine the opportunities for online culinary school that are happening right now. Or one birthday party I know, the wisdom of one of my parent clients, where she has a 7-year-old. She arranged for stores to send 6 or 7 of their fellow buddies, friends, pizza kits, complete pizza kits. The flour, the water, the oil, the cheese, the sauce. And then there was a pizza chef, and each parent-child unit, and these 7-year-olds or rising 7-year-olds were able to, in their own home bubble, in the little pictures as they watched the Zoom, they were able to laugh and giggle and create pizzas. Everybody started with a pizza happy face, and then a funky monkey pizza with bananas and peanut butter. And you can imagine where we're going with this. It became a fun way to socially engage. It became an adorable and yet COVID safe birthday party. They even had the gluten pizzas for the families that couldn't. It was such an ingenious way of connecting. But your question and what led us here is teenagers. Their bodies thrive from the affirmation of others, and yet their bodies are often challenged and they feel less than adequate, less than available. This is an opportunity to equalize the playing field. And so we want to help our kids to recognize that as well, and to be able to look for some of the body-based ways to find hope again. For example, in each of our offices, we have some form of movement. My favorite office is our small one with a swing. In fact, when we do this again, perhaps we'll video with that office so you can see. But the swing, it's an indoor swing in the office. And then we have a wall that's that's plywood. And kids who get so angry, they're able to kick against the swing. Now, with kids not able to come to our offices, their families are setting up swings, maybe in the backyard, maybe in the house. And if you can't have a wall to kick against, take a huge exercise ball or take a pillow and put it out there so the kids can kick against that. And especially if there's rage and anger in the family, having a very safe, we use perhaps a yoga block or a yoga mat so that we're able to hold it up and the kids can kick against it. And barefoot kids kicking against this, they get that feeling, that permission to release, that release that comes from kicking away. I love using the yoga mat as a baseball bat, where the parent holds the yoga mat, something like this, and the kid can kick against it so that there's no danger. The kid is kicking against the mat. The mat then gets to go like this, so that there's movement and there's a sense of completion. That's a sensory motor exercise that has been adapted to the time of COVID. And that with that kicking, there's a release that happens. And then always I say, how do you feel after all that kicking? I'll ask the parent to hold the bat, the so-called bat, but of course it's a nice soft one. I'll ask the kid to kick as hard as they can. And collaboratively, they're able to experience a shift from the inside. Or when there's huge rage that comes, giving an opportunity to let go, to feel the destruction, to feel the release of that. Here's one wonderful example. Often, if you have glass bottles that at home you're drinking out of, Coca-Cola bottles or glass bottles of water, if you take those glass bottles and you put them in a very secure Ziploc bag, and then you take that inside another Ziploc bag, and then allow your kids safely to hold on to all of the rage, to really capitalize on those moments of rage in a safe manner, and taking that bag and throwing it can feel like such a release. And often the breaking of the glass inside the bottle allows us to know it's safe, it's actually environmental friendly, it allows for the release because you're breaking the glass and then you're able to recycle it. Here's another one for those who are working with our littler kids: filling water balloons and throwing those balloons. What a release that can happen, helping to consolidate the release. Or don't use the water balloons, but rather the balloons that we might be prone to blow up ourselves, those kind of helium balloons, filling those with water. They don't break as easily. So you can do it over and over. It's fun, but it's also a release, a way of getting out your anger. Also, blowing a balloon up goes back to breath. That taking a big breath, and then let's do a race, blowing the balloon. When the balloon blows up, we're able to exhale all that and see who can blow the biggest balloon up, who can let go of the most hot air. You know, we might turn that nomenclature of you're just filled with hot air. Well, what do you do with hot air? Use it to blow up a water balloon, or blows up a balloon, and then tie a knot and then you can play a game with your parent. All of this can be done inside our sessions. We are helping to physicalize some of the rage that we have inside. We as therapists can help our clients to engage in the interaction that happens with a parent-child in these parent-child sessions. And we're giving our parents so many resources. These are so many things that they can do to be able to turn down their anxiety, to be able to rework the thoughts, the feelings that they have. Talk therapy is a beautiful beginning. And then through the lens of sensory motor psychotherapy, we're introducing some resources the parents might not have thought of. Another example of that would be parents who feel that they're isolated from their own family members. Maybe they're sandwich generation. They have parents that they can't see. They have children who haven't seen their grandparents for so long. And I have a beautiful trick to help bring the generations together. We talk about the hugs that grandparents want to give their grandkids, or that parents want to give their own parents. So I've had this pillow for years that I picked up from IKEA, but I know that they're in stock now. We call it the hug pillow. These are the arms. You can hug the pillow. You can wrap the arms around you. But the beauty of giving these hug pillows to family members is they can do it concomitantly. One parent can be in New York while the grandchild's in LA. The parent can either oversee the child and the grandparent, or every family member can have them. I think they're $5.99 when I just looked. They've become so popular, maybe through some of the epidemic that people are needing these. I love and I recommend. I think it's a great way to help. Also with anger, you can push. Yeah, and always after all that pushing, notice what happens after all that pushing. When I'm working with clients in the office, I'll have them push. I'll be on one end, they'll be on the other. And we push. Well, we don't have that resource now. So I'll encourage them to find a wall, put the pillow against the wall, and do that very pushing. And always notice what happens after. But it doesn't necessitate these pillows. You can grab any pillow. We have these square pillows. We have fat pillows, thin pillows, balls, different ways to get the anger out, to somatically shift from what's going on in our body to let it go. Let's jump back to your question earlier. The parent who's enraged at their child because of an interaction or at their spouse. We talked about the pushing here.
Yeah.
Imagine pushing against the wall right in the middle of the dialogue. We don't even need a pillow. Just stand, perhaps in an A-frame, and push against the wall. Where I have one child who gets so angry, he fills up with anger. So he's very happy taking a plank. Those are his words. I had encouraged him to do the yoga plank position. He will drop into a plank when he's so angry. It's a sign to his parent that we need to slow down a little, to titrate whatever's going on. It allows this boy to push with his arms and feel the pressure with his arms and feel his whole body aligned in a plank. And then when he's really angry, he does a push-up or two. And then we turn it into fun, where let's see how many push-ups he can do without taking a break. He's really building up. It's his exercise. His rage has become his resource. It allows him not to yell, to scream, he channels it into the push-up, into the ground, and into the contest. It can become a contest with a reward. If he knows he'll have monetary rewards are great with our teenagers. You're not allowed to yell at me, the mom can say, until you've taken a plank or two, or you've done your 10 push-ups or your 100 push-ups, and have a plank jar, a money jar, where money goes into the jar every time an argument is redirected through planks. These are some of the creative ways that we've helped It started when I had a teenager who said, I really don't want to go to group therapy. It does no good. And we came up with a plan. Well, why don't you do planks or push-ups and lead the whole group in planks or push-ups? And he did that. And he will, through the course of therapy, do push-ups while also listening and while also getting the monetary reward. It's a win-win-win. The parent gets the kid to go to therapy. The kid doesn't have the restlessness that comes from online therapy after a whole day of online classes.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows him to be an agent or a leader in teaching other teens about these tricks, which they then tell their parents, they report back. And in our recent session, the kids were all sharing what they were able to purchase with their so-called anger money, redirected anger money. It works really well, and it's collaborative.
Yeah, very cool. I was wondering, because I know that a lot of your group work, I mean, I've seen you show some tapes of the very valuable work that you do with some of your teen groups and at conferences, and it's a lot of, those kind of things, like maybe they were all pushing on a ball or doing something that was, helpful. And I just wondered how, I was wondering, how do you do that now with this situation? And it sounds like you're finding lots of ways for people to use the same kind of, get the same kind of sensory input, but do it at home.
Well, through the Sensory Motor Psychotherapy Institute, I've been teaching online, and I lead a consultation group weekly. We have 2 going on ongoing, and another one that will start in the fall, where I show these videotapes. And thank you, a shout out to the parents that allowed you, Lisa, to see it at some of the conferences, be it at UCLA or abroad or wherever I'm teaching, the videos. And the Institute has obscured the faces. So we've hid the identities, but not the treatment modalities. And there's something very powerful about my teaching as I'm doing today, but even more powerful when you can watch the video, you can see the kids, even our littlest ones, all the way through to some of our adult groups. You can see the way that we work. By videotaping, the clients get to see themselves as well. And I have one series of ongoing groups of college and beyond kids who allowed me, how gracious of them, to videotape so that we talk about some of these issues that come up. And in the moment, we're able to come up with ways together of working. And often group members will share how they work together. Often it's through the sensory motor psychotherapy treatment modalities. One that comes up is coffee. Let's take a minute to talk about that. Yeah. Coffee is a resource for so many of our young adults, but never until the time of COVID had I done a video group where we all sat and noticed how we experienced the anticipation of a cup of coffee. In this case, it was iced coffee. It was 3 weeks ago with the heat of the heat wave of LA. It was one of these worldwide heat waves, but in LA it was extraordinarily hot. And for some of our kids who do have the capacity to get iced coffee but don't have air conditioning, this made all the difference. So the thought about it, we slowed things down. We thought about what it would be like to take that first sip of iced coffee. And then they would shake their iced coffee. They would listen to the ice cubes rattling. Some of them would have straws. Others chose not to use straws. The metal straws, which are so good for our environment, are also so yummy when you refrigerate them first. An ice cold straw and an ice cold drink. And then we took them right to the edge of just notice what happens to your body, your breath in your body when you think about taking a sip of coffee. Many of them would burst out in the biggest of smiles. And notice how your body shifts. Even before you think about the potential caffeine, or even with decaffeinated coffee. One member had matcha latte, some with coconut milk, and they were able to delineate what their perfect drink was and make it for themselves. And one wonderful rebel had lemonade instead. And it was so beautiful as each of them could see how they resource for themselves. And as they sat back and enjoyed their coffee, that became a group experience, because in the helplessness that many of our young adults are feeling, in the isolation they're feeling, they were able to come together. And of course, there was lots of sharing about their recipes and what they made and what they did. But woven into that became a layer of self-resource, of calming the central nervous system, of inviting in that sense of, I'm okay, and I'm not alone, and I'm not the only one who feels it, woven into some of the traumas that they're experiencing. This happened right as the universities were announcing, we're going online for the year. Not all universities, but some like USC let all of our LA people and all the people who were coming from out of town to know that 90 to 100% of the undergraduate classes will be online for the entire year. And the sadness and the helplessness and the rage. And yet the resource of knowing I'm not alone and knowing that I can drink the coffee. And also there is a whole cadre of teen now adults who weren't as apprehensive about the COVID-19 at the beginning. And then it became very clear that this is hitting our young, this is the population who are in their teens and 20s and 30s are at risk. Today, sadly, in an email, I'm on the faculty at SC in the graduate school teaching graduate, undergraduate, and we were just given a notice that was also in the Los Angeles Times that the 250 people at SC have now been identified with COVID, many of them in the sorority blocks, the fraternity blocks. And yet students are not on campus. This is huge. This is with no campus activity. They're being diagnosed. And the fear of loss. And there was a 30-year-old who went to a COVID party intending, we're part of a whole COVID group, saying we're going to be the risk takers. And he passed away 2 weeks ago, which really shook to the core young adults. There's a whole cadre who are now feeling relief that they're not going back to school. So coupled with those who are feeling extreme loss, others who are feeling extreme fear, we have emotions that we as therapists are addressing online because kids are not coming for live therapy sessions. I'm doing 1 or 2 or 3 a week distance therapy in the garden component of our offices. And even with that, it's because there are such extreme situations that these sessions could not continue online. But I'd say 90% of my clients and 95% of my associates' clients are all online, and 100% of our groups are online. And with that, we're finding ways to feel connected, albeit apart, feeling less loss, finding resources. The coffee example was one of many that came up from the kids who were talking about not being able to hang out at their favorite coffee hangout at Alfred's or at some of these different, Love Coffee is the coffee place in LA that so many kids like to hang out, the Santa Monica community, and not having that. So that's why that exercise, while one might look at it as, yes, it's a sensory-motor psychotherapy resource, it allows to talk about the loss, the not being able to get together after, that we're all feeling when going to school and going after school to some of these hangouts are no longer available.
Right. And I know that ambivalence, I hear it from my patients and from my nieces and nephews that partly they're afraid for school to start, or to be back in class because of those kinds of things. At my niece's university, there's also was an outbreak on Fraternity Row where she lives. I mean, she lives in a sorority.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and she's here. So, I mean, she wasn't exposed, but 120 kids, and this is in the middle of summer. It's again without any student activity. But, and some of her sorority sisters were diagnosed with it. I mean, it's so close to home, So there's these mixed feelings about not getting to go back. Like, oh, I don't want to miss out, and oh, I don't know if I want to really get sick, and it's,
You're mentioning the ambivalence, and if we look on a line, I would say we're talking about waves. We've spoken a lot about anger, but let's look on the other side, from ambivalent to despairing to hopeless to immobilized to feeling catatonic or despair of why go on. This is going to go on forever. I have lost my high school, or I've lost my college rituals. It's not coming back. Those are some of the emotions that I addressed a couple weeks ago. Pat Ogden and I did a very powerful workshop that is available through the Sensory Motor Psychotherapy Institute, entitled Hopelessness, Helplessness, and Despair. And I'll add ambivalence, because that's how you've led us here, Lisa, this ambivalence and the hopelessness. And this workshop that Pat and I did is available. People can go onto the sensorymotorpsychotherapy.org website or talk to the office, and they will link you to this course. And it's a powerful one, because we're looking at some of the foundations of despair that another colleague and I, Larry Hedges and I, did a workshop last year, and we're doing another one the second weekend of January 2021, The Call of Darkness, which really looks at hopelessness and despair through the lens of Larry brings the whole history, Dr. Hedges brings the whole history of hopelessness to the forefront, and I specifically address adolescent despair. And I know that this workshop won't be taped, so I invite you all to put that into your book and go onto the Lifespan Learning website, lifespanlearn.org. Lisa, you can get them some of these. I'll get you a list of all of this information. But because of
that to send out, yeah, that'd be great.
That's because whenever we're talking about such painful and confidential clients, we don't tape that. Though Pat Ogden and I did tape our workshop without showing the videos, Dr. Hedges and I won't. So yes, please join us if this is an area that you're wanting to understand better, because the hopelessness is far worse when we couple the isolation, and it's grown far worse. The literature is showing that hopelessness and despair has become exponentially increased in the last few months, particularly in the last couple months. When we first saw this epidemic this pandemic come to light, we didn't realize how global, how insidious, and how ongoing it would be. And some are saying, without the leadership, we don't know who to trust. We don't trust anybody. We certainly don't trust ourselves. And that's where, once again, finding someone that you can link to, finding a connection, it links back to a panel Bessel van der Kolk and I were on a few years ago in Australia, where Dr. van der Kolk, who speaks so much about the body in his book, The Body Keeps Score, and his many other books, spoke about the research that he was overseeing and involved with right after 9/11, and 6 months later looking at post-traumatic stress. And we look at the population who had no one to call, who had nobody to reach out to after. The isolation of not checking in on a loved one or on a friend, or reaching out to say, hey, here's what happened, here's how I experienced it. Or those who couldn't do it, or the population that were being blamed for it, the tragedy of blaming all in our community who might have physically appeared to be linked to the perpetrators of such violence. Mm-hmm. We're seeing it now when we have a president who's calling this the Chinese epidemic instead of what we know to be a human experience. And we're seeing the Asian population or Pan-Asian population blamed. Often we're hearing about it in our sessions. Mm-hmm. And that tragedy of that, and the hopelessness of being blamed. You know, I invite in my sessions rage. How dare they? How dare anybody? And we know now with the protests, they're shouting out through the beauty of community coming together in protests and then being shut down. And we see what's happening in Oregon, and we're seeing so much, bringing so much hopelessness along with rage, along with despair. So Bessel's work speaks about if you can connect with someone, and the research shows that those who had someone to connect to, someone to call, didn't have the signs of post-traumatic stress after 6 months that those who had no one experienced. So we become, as therapists, the gift because we are connecting. We are helping them. We are saying, I can't know what it's like to be you, but I can know what it's like to feel despair as you do. And through either self-disclosure or through what I call that invisible cord. I'll often speak about how sometimes the mind to mind, that Dan Siegel writes about it and speaks about it, but I call it the invisible cord between myself and my client. Sometimes harder online, often easier to access live, but still there. That knowing, that sixth sense, that ability to really resonate through the body and the information of the body, and the masterful work that we as body clinicians can do picking up cues. But I was trained as a psychodynamic psychotherapist, so certainly the underpinnings of the mind reading that happens, or the mind to mind, allows us to communicate, to say with words or to say with our eyes that sense of you're not alone. That's the gift we can give our clients right now, and to help them feel more connected, and to ask them or join with them. For those of my clients who are struggling with substance, or the parents who have been many years resourcing through AA meetings, getting online with them, joining a meeting with them online once or many times until they're able to get that sense of community and the value of online. Sometimes it's just so hard to do it on our own the moment we reach out. And I love some of the ways Pat Ogden will describe her hopeless, helpless clients in that video, in that 2-hour training that we did. It allows for people to look at all the body signs. For example, if you're watching right now, imagine what this body might hold, the posture as I turn away. And for those of you who are listening but not watching, I'm turning my shoulders, my whole shoulders are hunched, I'm rolling my head down. In fact, try it on. Drop your head, drop your shoulders, everybody watching or listening, maybe even close your eyes and disconnect. I'm doing it so I don't have the video connection with Lisa and her smiling, encouraging face. This aloneness, this embodied experience of alone often is so prevalent in our early experience, and often in those moments of trauma that are recaptured now as we ourselves are feeling it. And notice what thoughts or feelings come up. Maybe a despair, a hopelessness as my shoulders go down, my head drops. I can feel the disconnect with you, my audience. And now come back into the room, come back into connection. Perhaps your eyes are connecting with me, or even as I reach out to you, you can reach back into the screen. Reaching with our clients is one more way, even if we're not live, to say I'm here with you, or to communicate via our body. There's a whole exercise that Pat Ogden and I speak about that she has led the Sensorimotor Psychotherapy Institute to do, understanding the Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen movements. Reaching is one of those that becomes both a body-based experience of connection, implicit in the body, and even if it's online. We'll have clients who say, why should I bother doing this? You're just going to pull your hand back. And you can think of what that message is. When their experience is, why bother connecting with others? They'll just pull out the rug from under me. That Lucy, and Charles Schultz's character, Lucy in the Peanuts gang, how she would always pull out the football. Yeah, I love that you knew that one, Lisa. That's a great one, that you knew that. That experience is what some of our hopeless clients are experiencing. So if we can communicate a message of we're not going to do that, or help them get connected to hotlines, call suicide hotlines with your clients who think about suicide, so that they on their own don't have to be alone. Encourage them then to call and report back to you. And for our teenagers, the nationwide resource of Cedars-Sinai Hospital's Teen Line, the most phenomenal program. My kids trained in it when they were teenagers. Many clients who are in our groups train in it. Cedars-Sinai has the best free training, so that if you're working with a client, they can become the therapists, and the trainings are all online. Or if you're working with a client who's struggling, children, adolescents, teens, even if they're older teens, call Teen Line and have a teenager support you in your journey. Can help break through the despair.
And again, it allows kids to connect with their peers rather than an adult, where they might be much more hesitant to call our national lifeline, but to talk to a teenager.
To have a teen there for teens. It can be an adult for an adult. It can be a teen for an adult. It can even be an adult for a teen. There's no age limit, but the hotline, which is available 6 to 10 every night, which are such prime times for kids. And those hours may have changed since my kids are older now. But I know that those hours for Teen Line, that allows for kids to feel I'm not alone.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I have people feeling the despair. I have a lot of people feeling the fear, like anxiety rising up in them. I have a young man I'm working with who, again, is home from college, but he's always had a breathing thing that happens sometimes when he's anxious. He's a high-performing kid, very driven, but he'll feel like he can't breathe even though he's breathing fine. But it has that feeling. And so now with COVID, this seems like, oh, maybe this is a COVID symptom, not just my anxiety. It's very easy to get caught up in that.
Yeah. Haven't all of us, anyone who catches a cold at the time of COVID, I can't breathe. Yeah, absolutely. But here there's a pre-existing condition. So addressing the anxiety, in part, this is where we breathe. So I encourage, in fact, Lisa, just do that with me. Put your hand on your heart. Let's all do it. Both thinking about what happens inside when your hand goes to your heart and feeling your breath, especially if your teen is having a hard time breathing, putting your hand right where the struggle is. It could be the throat, it could be the breath. Just finds most people who put their hand on heart find this is such a resource, such a calming experience. In fact, as I'm with all of you, I notice I slow down. My enthusiasm is still here, but the rate at which I'm speaking is shifting. As my hand goes to heart, I'm leaning back. Let's just notice as you're listening, if your hand is on your heart, to what changed. See what you're feeling. How about you, Lisa? What do you notice?
It's definitely calming. That's the thing I would say. And like you said, it slows you down a bit.
It slows you down. It's calming. While some people may not find it calming, we want to be curious about what they find. Lisa and I both find it very calming. So for someone who's having a challenge with that area, with breathing, calming down becomes a really important resource. Yeah. And now, notice the aftermath. Your hand taken away from your chest, mine away from mine. Our listeners, just notice what changes in the aftermath of slowing things down, putting your hand on your heart. Maybe there's a relief. Oh, I'm so glad my hand's not on my heart anymore. That wasn't working for me. Yeah. Notice the aftermath of hand on heart if it was not working. And then there's one more resource that just magically appeared. And I'm just going to tip this down. You'll meet Milo, the co-therapist. This is Milo. And
Okay.
Milo, our Springer Spaniel, just popped into the room just in time to say hi to our audience, came in for a cuddle. But I would say that over the last 4 months, Milo has become even more of a resource for me, because as much as he gets all the attention, I never go anywhere or do anything. So he's around me more than ever. I'm the one who has that gift. And I know a lot of my clients have fostered animals, that some of them have chosen to keep the animals, others have not. I've written a whole host of letters for clients who are very anxious and find that having a comfort animal, such as a comfort dog, helps. And their landlords, I've never had a landlord or an airline that has said no. When I write, and I'm a psychologist, so when I write and I describe the anxiety that they're feeling, they respect our field and they are willing to allow them to have an animal by their side. And so I've had animals that have manifested in my clients' lives. Milo's been in many of the videos that I mentioned that I teach with. Does allow for regulation, for self-soothing, for calming. And so those parents that you asked about earlier on, when a parent and a child is in conflict, if you can invite that animal, the dog, the cat, in the room, assuming it's safe and the conflict is not going to get violent, it often allows, with one family member who gets dysregulated, she knows now, she'll call her puppy. And the puppy, who's no longer a puppy, but we call it that, jumps onto her lap. And she's able to self-soothe by holding the animal while also having her argument with her mother. And you can see if we're doing a family session and she's feeling herself get angry and she's like, I don't want to talk about it. And she's rubbing the animal. You can watch her calm. She's gentle to the animal. She's gentle to herself. She's even more gentle with her words for her mom. And so I invite people to either have live animals, or one of my girls who's going, one of my clients, a female who's going back to college, she's been working with me for many years. And we speak about that Winnicott transitional object. And for her, she has found Milo has been such a wonderful transitional object in therapy, allowing her to regulate. So mine's an English Springer Spaniel. I've gone online and I've gotten a stuffed animal that I sent to her house so that when we were doing therapy sessions, she would rub her stuffy, the stuffed animal that she's calling her stuffed Milo. She would rub her stuffed animal. She's about to go to college. Not only is Milo, our Milo, going with her to college where I'll do online sessions, but she and her mom have a wonderful arrangement where mom's favorite animal, which is an elephant, this client who might be listening, I hope you are, can now know that I'm sharing with all of you. She came up with the idea of she and her mom have stuffed elephants, and they're able to do that. Mom can have the animal in LA, and her daughter can go off to college with their stuffed animal. And then now the daughter has some friends she's already missing, and they're getting them. And the beauty is to have one at each place so that online doesn't feel as far away. And even if we're not online, this client's going back east, so 3 hours is very different. So even if she wakes up in the morning and she's feeling lonely for her mom, for her house, for her friends, she can grab those transitional objects and they serve to self-regulate. Winnicott wrote so beautifully about these for our youngest of clients in his studies, but here we are utilizing his nomenclature and bringing transitional objects of all sorts into our own lives. And I can assure you, every cup of coffee for those group members that they have when they're off in their own worlds may reflect back and may relate right back to their sessions where they're able to think about their friends. As they take those sip of coffees, they'll remember those positive experiences and they won't feel as alone.
Yeah, I think that's the key there, because this is such a hard time for that.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I think about that one of the facts that came out of when the pandemic was first exploding in New York. It's one of the first things they ran out of was shelter dogs. People wanted an animal.
You're right. I hadn't thought about that. The
They
idea that the
comfort
shelter
them.
are not available because so many people are knowing they're that instinct of knowing. I'll call that primordial urge to connect with someone else and to
Hmm.
be able to help another life, a shelter animal. And now we have a different epidemic here in America of people who are so sadly worried that they may be evicted and may not be able to keep their animals. And so any of you who can both offer a temporary home or a permanent home to families that find themselves so affected in this awful time with these hardships, what a gift you would be giving, not just to yourselves or not just your clients giving to themselves, but to those who have so much love and yet nowhere to house their animals.
I think that's so important. Yeah, because now we're getting to the more eviction stage of this pandemic. Yeah,
Yeah.
and people don't want to lose those animals, and they don't want to leave them homeless.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's such a hard thing. But I do think that that's important. And I think the other thing that animals can do is they get you out to take them for a walk. They make you do some of those things that you were saying that are calming. That's certainly been true for me and my husband. We have two right at the moment, dogs, and so we take them for a walk at the end of each day, and that's or early in the morning when we can.
See, that's genius. You're looking at if I have someone else that I care for, then I can go on the way you just described it. That even if you're not in the mood for ever getting out of bed because you're feeling so hopeless, so helpless, and yet you feel the pull to take care of your sweet animal.
Hmm.
And then once you're up and out, it changes everything. Now, I've had clients who feel that kind of hopelessness in the days pre-pandemic who are driven by that first cup of coffee. So we set it up where that coffee is not available at home. Even though I'm thinking of one client, he had the grinder and he had the fresh coffee, and we recognized that for him, it was better that he would get up. He didn't have an animal, but he had a drive to get the coffee. He had to get up, and his internal drive had him walk to get the coffee at the neighborhood barista. And once he was up and he didn't feel like engaging, and that was okay, he wore a baseball hat. In fact, as you're watching, put on your imaginary baseball hat. So let's everybody do it. Yeah, great. And imagine pulling your baseball hat down so you can see out, but nobody has to see you. He still went out, but this became a safety mechanism. And then he put on a pair of glasses. He'd have his hat, he'd have his glasses. He
Hmm.
didn't have to engage with anybody. And yet it allowed him to go up and to go out. And that made all of the difference. And so that was his way of starting a day. I'm thinking of another person where we did something similar. And for her, if we could get her out of bed and out of her despair and into her shower, everything felt better. That thermal regulation, that body-based sense of, when she had the hot water on her body. So we shifted her shower time. Instead of taking evening baths or showers, she chose to have morning showers. And that allowed her to feel so much better. Now, she and I were working when she had to get up and go to the studio where she was working. But instead, everything became online and she was miserable. But by showering in the morning before she did the online, she felt better about herself. And then there came the time, many of us who are a bit over teenage had those whispers of gray. And so wearing a hat or finding other solutions allowed her to embrace coming online. And she found something that she would put on her freshly washed hair each morning, a powder, a color powder that stayed on to wet hair better. And just that reward that made her feel that she looked better, made her show up better, everything. And so for our kids, if you can help them find something resourcing, like if they like jumping in the pool and you have a pool, fabulous. Jumping in the shower, fabulous. The thermal regulation is calming. If you live near an ocean, as we do, there's something so magical about the freedom of the ocean that now we, Los Angelinos, we appreciate now that the beaches are open again, because out of safety. The governor closed down the beaches. Now that they're open, it gives you space. You can more easily be 5 feet, 6 feet apart. But if you're land-bound and you're not accessing these things, finding what the resources are. One of my clients is in nature, resourcing via nature, just sitting under a tree, and we have these tall palm trees. So you have a moment of shade, and after maybe 15 minutes, you need to move to capture the shade. So they'll move, they'll pick up and move, but just finding the shade of the tree and the wind that often builds up when the beach fog of, we call this the June gloom. It's so gloomy for hours upon hours until it lifts. And if we orient ourselves towards that nature and the resource of the gloom, some love the June gloom, or now it's July and August, we still wake up to that. And you're able to look out after and feel the fresh air and see the sunlight. Or for those who are living in areas where it's so hot, finding the resource of shelter. Often in the summertime, libraries serve that function, but now that we don't have that, finding a place where we can cool ourselves off. For us, we don't have central air, but we have wonderful fans all over. So it may be having a water balloon fight or having a spray from a water gun or a water jet. It may be just dipping your head in hot water and then feeling the coolness after, or in a bucket of cold water, or the cold bucket ice challenge from maybe 5 years ago that so many kids were doing both for philanthropy and for fun. The ice bucket challenge, we videotaped this. This was one of the groups we videotaped, just like 5 or 10 minutes of it. That dropping your head in ice and how it changes everything. I'm reminded of that based on our conversation today, Lisa, that the beauty of doing these exercises and videotaping was to have the kids talk about the aftermath of the ice bucket challenge. And so in that video, they would talk about, oh, I feel a calmness, I feel an awakeness, I feel a vitality. When we're looking at our clients who are angry or anxious or hopeless or despairing, we need these type of resources. We invite them in. We thrive having a sense of balance and equanimity that comes from changing the things we can change. And of course, accepting those things that we can't change. And if we're looking at the Alcohol Anonymous model, the wisdom to know the difference. I have many clients who are on their sober journeys who are finding that those words are so sage right now. The wisdom to know the difference. And as we come to a conclusion of our time today, thinking about what we can do as therapists, maybe giving ourselves that challenge every day to come up with something new that we haven't done, something that we haven't done in a while. One that comes to mind for me is skipping. I skipped years, found myself skipping just because it came up in conversation, or finding a new way to do something old new again. And the best part, renaming through our mindfulness community, renaming with gratitude anything that we are grateful for. I started with that, saying how grateful I am that I am not driving, how frustrated I am. I get so tired after all these Zoom sessions along with my clients that Zoom fatigue is real. How blessed I am that I can continue earning while working through this terrible time, until it's safe and my clients can feel safe coming back live again. How grateful I am that I'm living and breathing, and how grateful I am to those of you who are serving our community and helping us at this very challenging time, this most unique time in our lives. I thank you all. I thank all of you who are listening for showing up, being present here, and being present in your own practice. And for you, Lisa, for bringing us together in all of these different series and all these different communities, helping us to feel less alone at a time that is so new and that can evoke for us, even in just this short time together, a sense of community. Thank you.
Oh, well, thanks so much, Bonnie. I really appreciate it. And I think there's so many things that will be helpful to people watching, to shift things in themselves, to shift things in people they're working with, to help their, the young people in their life shift things as well. I really appreciate that. And also, if you would send those resources, the list of how to access some of those materials you mentioned, the training you did with Pat Ogden and so forth, I'd really appreciate it, because we'll pass that along to people that they can download that when they access this conversation.
Wonderful. And you can reach me as well through my website, drbonniegoldstein.com and sensorymotorpsychotherapy.org. I will send you all of that, lifespanlearning.org, so that you're able to really take what we talked about today to a new level through the ease of your own home.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.